can know what we've been told, and we can know it with certainty, it is fairly pointless speculating about what we have not been told. And so several people have asked me questions. Will we be able to recognize each other if in the period as we wait for the new creation, our souls and so forth? Will we be aware of time and so forth? And I don't think we've been told these things. The three important words, wait and see. It's what your mother told you when you were small. And then just one other trivial comment. A lot of talk at events like this about men not talking much. Could it just be that we're more efficient? I think we're rather good at communicating. We're just very efficient. Now, our aim in this final talk, tell your wife that when you get home. Our aim in this final talk is that we set our life's priorities in the light of God's future. Last summer, the park behind our house had a major refit, and it was determined a number of trees should be cut down, and the men arrived in February and marked the trees and came back in April to cut them down. And in the intervening time, birds have begun nesting, and two magpies in particular built their nest with tremendous precision and great skill at the top of one of the trees. What they didn't realize was that it had been marked. And sure enough, just as they put the finishing twig in place, it came crashing to the ground. They then actually set about building their nest at the top of another of the marked trees, and just as they were halfway through their work, sure enough, it came crashing to the ground. And I'm eager that we do not waste our life building beautiful, perfect nests in, as it were, trees that are going to be brought crashing to the ground. I want us to invest wisely. And we're going to look at the parable, so-called parable of the talents, in detail. But before we do that, I thought we'd glance at the faithful steward and the wise and foolish bridesmaid. The faithful steward, chapter 24, verse 45 to 51. Being ready looks like being faithful. And the emphasis in this parable is on wisdom and faithfulness. The master is the Lord Jesus. The master goes away. The master entrusts the household to his household manager. And the emphasis is on wisdom, responsibility, faithfulness, and accountability, with the implication being obvious. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom his master has set over his household to give them their food at their proper time? Blessed is that servant when his master will find him so doing when he comes. Truly I tell you, he will set him over all his possessions. Everything we have, money, personal gifts, life circumstances, opportunities in the service of Jesus, our responsibilities at church, in families and at work, they're all given to us on trust. And, says Jesus, we are to be faithful. Consider the guardian of some great estate, left to look after it for a child before the child's maturity. Consider the wickedness, really, the wrong of being left in charge, and then the child reaching maturity and the trustee saying, oh, well, I squandered it, I'm terribly sorry, it's all gone. And so the first parable has as its emphasis faithfulness and wisdom, verse 45. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom his master has set over his household? Am I faithful? Am I trustworthy? I think it's worth doing something of an inventory from time to time and considering that with which we have been entrusted. Our finances, the opportunities, gospel opportunities at work, our friendships, our family, our personal gifts. Am I being faithful? Am I being faithful in my workplace? I'll never forget as a young army officer saying to my grandfather, who was a great evangelist, I wish you were with me in the officers' mess. To which he replies, quick as a flash, why do you think God's put you there, William? God has set you over his gospel work in your office, in the club that you're in as a retired person. God has set you over his gospel work there. Why do you think God's put you there? You see, who then is the faithful and wise servant whom his master has set his household over his household to give them their food at the proper time? So the first parable then, just very briefly, is on faithfulness and wisdom. But the second, that is the parable of the 10 bridesmaids or 10 virgins, why the emphasis here is on wisdom and waiting, or if you like, wisdom and watching. There is a development. Each one of these begins with a therefore or a then, and is tightly tied into the talk of the destruction of the known world in chapter 24. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 of them were wise. Now look at the end of this well-known parable, verse 11 and 12. He answered, truly, truly, I tell you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, wait therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour. And of course the parable of the 10 virgins is a parable about being prepared for the long delay. First century weddings, the groom's family hosted and funded the reception as the father of 2 boys. I think it's a thoroughly bad idea. But the wedding was at the bride's place, and then, having had the wedding at the bride's place, they retreated to the groom's family for the wedding feast. And so there was frequently a long delay as you move from one to the other. Why? The ceremony had gone on rather long, the preacher, you know, or the bride was distracted, perhaps took a long time doing her hair, you know, or whatever it happened to be. And so there was a long delay. But the wise bridesmaids in the first century knew they had to be ready however long the delay, whatever the wait. And the point is very simple. Jesus warned of a long delay. With the Lord a day is as 1,000 years. We are told that we are to wait, and to wait as we wait by being ready. And so if the first parable is one about wisdom, the second is parable one about wisdom and faithfulness. This second parable is about wisdom and waiting. Don't be caught napping. Don't be caught out. Don't be caught short. There's no time for late night shopping when he comes. It's not, oh, I was ready once, you know, or my parents were ready, or you should have seen me in my first year at university. I was really ready then, or when I was in ministry, I was ready, but now I've retired and, well, I'm not really ready now. My wife, she was ready. The idea that I can leave getting ready to some later stage or a more convenient part of my life is ruled out of court by this parable. To the person who says, well, I'll bluff my way in at the end, or I'll barter my way in at the end, I think a lot of people in the city think that. I'll be able to pull one past God. I'll offer him a deal. Or I'll bulldoze my way in. I've been able to bulldoze past everybody else in my life, and I'll bulldoze my way past God at the end. Jesus says, you fool. 5 of them were foolish. The word is moron. You moron. And it's in that context of faithfulness and wisdom and waiting, or wisdom and watching, that Jesus tells the parable of the talents. And it is absolutely a parable about plotting a wise course now in the light of certain future reality. A couple of years ago, I was speaking on this subject, and I'd been speaking at a conference, and I met a student one morning, and I said, well, how's it going with the teaching? How has this series impacted your thinking? We've been talking about the return of Christ. What have you been thinking? Now you know that it could come at any time. And he gave me a rather blank stare and said, well, realizing that he could come at any time, I don't bother to make my bed in the morning anymore. As if he ever did. He could come at any time. Why bother making it? No, that's not the point. And so this parable tells us how to be ready. And I want us to note the commission of the master, the commendation of the faithful, and the condemnation of the fraud. The commission of the master. Verse 14. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his ability. Then he went away. The parable is brilliantly set. Of course, before email, Skype, iPhones, and so forth, communication was limited, travel took a long time, and a journey, if you were going on a long one, you had to find a trustworthy deputy. And here we find a man of considerable wealth. He has to go on a long journey. He will be away for a significant period. And so he takes 3, literally slaves, and commissions them for service in his absence. It will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property, to one 5, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his ability. Clearly the master is meant to represent Jesus, for it will be like. He's talking about his departure and his return. Notice the 4. Clearly the servants are his disciples. But at this point we do need to do some serious work on precisely what the talents are. Because the Greek word talenton is translated the way it is talent, there has been considerable confusion, because our English word talent speaks of my or your individual gifts and abilities. Johnny is gifted at playing the flute. Jessica is an able hockey player. Sam is brilliant with figures. Britain's got talent. People therefore have taken the phrase, to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, and suggested that this parable has to do with us using the gifts and abilities that God has given us effectively for gain in this world. I'm not going to ask for hands up who's heard it talk like that, but numerous of us will have done. If you are gifted in business, go for it. Rise to the top. Make the most of your talents for Jesus. If you are good at drama, reach for the stars. Take to the stage, tap the boards. Get your name in floodlights for Jesus. If you're an able schoolman or woman, lead the school, become headmaster for Jesus. In other words, realize your potential. Don't waste your talent. It would be wrong not to become the best you could be in this world's eyes for Jesus. Frequently it is taught like that. Just a few seconds thought shows that this idea that the talent is my natural gift must be wrong. You can see from the footnote that a talent was a monetary unit. If you have the kind of Bible I have, there is a footnote. I don't know if it's there in the NIV, but you can see from it tells us that a talent was a monetary unit equivalent to roughly 20 years' wages. Now, I got my calculator out, and initially I did it with £10 an hour wage until we had builders in our house in London, and I reverted to 20, which was cheap at the price. I don't know how much builders are here in Bournemouth, but in London they're not cheap. And so for a London builder, a talent was a monetary unit worth roughly £800,000, 20 years' wages. And therefore we could read verses 14 to 15 like this. It's like a man who went on a journey, called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave £4 million. To another he gave £1,600,000, and to another £800,000, each according to his ability. Now it may be that for some extraordinarily wealthy individual here in Bournemouth, a Boscombe equivalent of Dimitri, £4 million is just a week's pocket money. But to most of us it's an extraordinary sum. Still we have to ask, what does it represent? And we have to say, not my particular gifts and abilities in terms of the capabilities that each of us has been given. Business acumen, ability to hit a golf ball straight, skill at cooking deep-fried Mars bars or whatever your thing is. No, the money in the phrase is separate from the ability. Did you notice that? He gave to each so many talents according to his ability. So the text deliberately separates out the talent from the ability, and therefore the talent can't be my ability. Nor can we say that the talent or the money represents the gospel itself, for it cannot be that he gave a bit of the gospel to one person and a bit of the gospel to another person and a bit of the gospel to another person. You cannot divide out the gospel message of the Lord Jesus Christ like that, as if the news of Jesus' kingly rule can be subdivided. No, in the context of Matthew's Gospel, the thing with which the Lord Jesus entrusts his disciples on his departure is his work. His work in advancing the growth of his kingdom message through the proclamation of the Gospel. that ties particularly, precisely in with the essence, the heart of this section in chapter 24 and verse 14. The gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations. It ties in with Jesus' very opening words in the gospel, go and make disciples, in his opening words, I will make you fishers of men, and it ties with his closing words in the gospel, all authority has been given, go and make disciples of all nations. So then, each has different gifts, each has different opportunities, each has different situations, stations and positions in life. How many of us are there here now? 85, 90, something like that? There are 85, 90 different sets of giftings, character, personality, opportunity, station and position in life. God knows this. And he entrusts to each one aspects of his business, the business of proclaiming the gospel, each according to his position, with the expectation that we seek to advance and maximize the assets he has entrusted to us, faithfully using what he's given us for the advance and the spread of the gospel, looking after it well, looking after it wisely in the particular position and station that he has given us. Wisely, patiently, steadily, not giving up, keeping at it till he comes back, persevering in maximizing his assets and the responsibilities with which he has entrusted us. So let's pause and consider the commission. The word for servant is quite literally slave. And therefore it's not hard to picture the slaves as their master disappears over the horizon on horseback, is it? No checkbook in those days, no bank account in those days, no bank transfers, cash was king. How did he give them the money, I wonder? Garments, that was the way you stored wealth, often in garments, hence rust and moth. Diamonds, perhaps? Was it land or some other commodity, a little treasure chest full of gold? Who knows? But not hard to imagine our friends as the master takes to his BMW and heads his way over the horizon. He's given me 4 million, can you believe it? What a what a privilege. What a responsibility. I've got 1.6 million to look after. He must trust me. He's given me 800,000. Can you believe it? What an honor, what a privilege, what an opportunity, what a responsibility. Remember the first day your parents left you in charge at home? I was just over the age of 40 actually at the time. So tells you rather more about me than it, and there we are. Look after the house, won't you? I'm in charge. Or your first day at work, the new suit, the tie, or whatever it happened to be, the overalls, your own set of tools, here I am, as you left the house. Or when your head of department said, I'm off on holiday, you look after the show, will you? What an honour. I remember at Sandhurst, at the end of the course, marching, you would have seen the Sovereign's Parade as you go up the steps, the Queen's Commission, chest puffed out. And so the Lord Jesus has entrusted to each of us, each according to his ability, the work of his kingdom. What a wonder. Does he know who I am? Well, he does. He's entrusted his reputation, the advance of his business, his concerns into our hands. I wonder if you've ever thought of it like that. What does it look like to be ready for his return? Being ready looks like maximizing the work of the gospel in the particular field in which he has placed us. And let me say and suggest to you that it is the highest and the most wonderful privileged commission you will ever receive. I've reached, bizarrely, the stage now where I witness people reaching the end of their working life at 53, 54, 55, can you believe it, in the city? So you young ones, press the fast forward button on your career. You may have risen to the top of your profession. You may have your name as a household name. Maybe you've not only provided for yourself and your family, but you've set up for generations to come. But ultimately, if all you have contributed and achieved is limited only to this world, how shallow, how trivial, how thin, how empty. No wonder the pagan secularist starts worrying about their legacy. Of course they do. They've got nothing to leave. Imagine coming to the end of your working life, or indeed to the closing years of your whole life. Oh, he made me a security guard, but I sought to live for Christ and tell everyone of the Lord Jesus that they came in through the office door. What a privilege. Or he gave me the opportunity as a doctor, and I used my surgery as appropriate when possible to speak to people of the Lord Jesus Christ. What an honour. I was a teacher, and in the school I sought to live for him, make him known. I was out of work for much of my life, but I used those days to invest my time in his business. What high honour. All I had time to do was pray. All I had time to do was pray. How wonderful. I maximised the master's assets. The commendation. I love this. It's all packed in there in verse 21. There are 3 parts to it. I love verse 21. We're going to drill down into it. It's so encouraging. Notice the commendation itself. Well done, good and faithful servant. Notice the reward. I will set you over much. Notice the experience. Enter the joy of your master, the commendation. Well done, good and faithful servant. So then we're expected to be faithful. Faithfulness is commended. There is a reward. Well done, good and faithful servant. Notice he speaks to each one personally. I love that. There's a personal standing in front of the master at the end where he says, Johnny, well done. Oh, Jim, well done. Alex, well done. Can you imagine it? As you stand before him, well, I did my little bit. Well done. I've never visited. There's a gravestone in Woolwich, apparently, the grave of Major James Jameson, who was killed by the accidental discharge of his orderly's pistol. And it reads underneath, well done, good and faithful servant, which I think is rather splendid, isn't it? I must go and visit it one day. But at the return of Jesus, he will summon you. People worry about the judgment of believers. I've heard it expressed as more of a prize giving. Well done. Isn't it glorious? Nothing forgotten, nothing unnoticed, everything rewarded. Remember the widow's mite in Luke's Gospel? Just 2 copper coins worth 1/128th of a day's wages. Peanuts, unless you're a builder. And then Jesus says, this poor widow has put in more than all of them, for they contribute her abundance, but she had her poverty. And in the next parable, so-called parable, it's not actually a parable, but in the sheep and the goats, the reality of the sheep and the goats, notice what they're rewarded for: a cup of water. Well done. You looked after a travelling speaker and welcomed him and the gospel he proclaimed. Well done. A text, maybe a card, I don't know what. Nothing goes unnoticed. Nothing forgotten. We too quickly beat ourselves up, don't we? You said a prayer for somebody, a missionary perhaps at church. Well done. It's wonderful. Nothing is unnoticed. Now look at the nature of the reward. In the equivalent parable, well, I will set you over much. In the equivalent parable in Luke's Gospel, the point is the same, the sums are different. And one is rewarded with 10 cities and another 5, though the sums were £8,000. Now think of that. I was speaking on this once and I said, even if one of the cities was Birmingham, that That is a phenomenal reality. 8,000 quid, have 5 Birminghams. And somebody, you know what happened afterwards. Somebody goes, oh, I come from Birmingham. And I thought, oh, fair enough. When I worked out what they were saying, I come from. So let me say, even if the city you come from is Southampton, it's quite a reward, isn't it? 10 cities. The grace of the Lord Jesus. The extraordinary generosity. God is no man's debtor. And of course, doesn't this show the absurdity, almost the wickedness, but the absurdity of the person who says, if I get involved in this area of ministry, leading the small group or joining the church council or becoming treasurer or whatever, if I get involved, it is such a sacrifice. Sacrifice? When everything is noticed and everything is rewarded and the master is so generous, that is a terrible inversion of truth. They're not earning rewards, of course, because all ministry is given to us in the first place by the master. And then notice the joy in verse 21. The joy, enter into the joy of your master. Now again, this is a remarkable thing, because they're just slaves. So join in the party, enter the joy, have a place at table, come, celebrate. And so, picture 30, 50, 70 years time, or indeed tomorrow or tonight as the master returns. I may not have made the most of every opportunity, but insofar as I am able, insofar as you've had opportunity, even so, I've served him. I've served him. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter the joy of your master. Picture the opposite. Well, I lived for myself, really. I lived for the next promotion. I lived for the next piece of peer group approval. I lived for my retirement. How thin, how shallow. Preachers are supposed to apply, and I'm very loath to apply this, really, because there are 80, 90 different circumstances round this room. And so each of us need, as we go away from here, to be saying to ourselves, given whom God has made me, the gifts he's given me and our family, the place he's placed me at work, what he's specifically this mission field, how am I going to maximize his assets? This is what took me, incidentally, this parable into paid Christian work. There may be somebody here with Bible teaching gifts. Maximize the assets. Use it to the full. This is what brought me out of the army, actually teaching this passage. I had to teach this passage somewhere, and I found myself saying to myself, William, you must maximize the assets. And then somebody said to me, I think you might be able to teach the Bible, sort of in a rough sort of way. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to maximize the assets, how am I going to spend the rest of my life training people to kill people? It's a lovely thing to do, to keep the peace, but might there not be a better? You see, the logic is inescapable. So this is what actually took me out of the army. But one of my heroes is David Cooper, who some of you know here, who was a teacher for 40, 50 years in the same school. I bumped into a bloke in the city. He's come alive Christianly in the last 7 years. And I bumped into him one day. I said, I've been down at Elstree. Oh, that's my old school. Really? Do you know there was a teacher there when I was a prep school boy there? He used to go round every evening, once a month in the evening, offering Bible reading notes. That's what he did. He stayed in that year in school for decade after decade, just offering out the Bible notes. And Robin got going as a Christian 7 years ago in the city. Well, praise God for David Cooper. He wasn't headmaster. You won't read of his name in the headlights anywhere. He just stuck at what he was doing. This is where the idea of career is so profoundly unhelpful. You know, career is a very pagan concept. Oh, I've got a career, you know, that I must take the next rung on the ladder. What an absurd idea. That I must take the next rung on the ladder. Why? I Might it not be a more useful way to maximize the master's assets by staying where you are? Might you have more time? In fact, might it be a more useful way to maximize the master's assets by taking a demotion, possibly? Do you see, we've got to think properly. I mean, I say to the guys in the city, what would you think of William Taylor? That's me, by the way. If I said to you, look, I've been rector at St Helens for 5 to 7 years, and there's a church down the road, and they're offering a slightly better salary, and the house is bigger, and then they give a bonus as well. And really, to be honest, it's the next rung. It's a slightly bigger congregation, and so I think that's the next place my career should be taking me. What would you say to me? What would you say to your vicar? If he came in on Sunday morning and said to you, well, that's what I'm going to do, and these are the reasons, you'd say, you must be joking. Are you a pagan or what? You see? So I need to be thinking, well, what are the opportunities God has given me in this place for the gospel? How am I going to maximize the assets? And more often than not, it may well involve staying where you are with the people you're with, because ministry is about relationships. And as you spend time there, you'll be the longest person you'll set the tone. You will. In the city, it'll only take 3 or 4 years because they sack people every 5 minutes in the city. You'll be setting the tone. People will be looking to you. You'll have all the relationships. And you will help to do ministry to your heart's content. Well, finally, and we must finish, the condemnation of the wicked. We have to finish here. It's actually where every single one of the parables ends, with the condemnation of the wicked. So it seems that just as commendation is key, so too is condemnation. And there's a great danger in verse 24 to the end that we spiral into introspection. Please don't do that. The last slave has completely missed the point. He appears to have entered the master's service, but he really knows nothing of the master at all. Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you scattered no seed. That's not the Lord Jesus. This man does not know the Lord Jesus Christ. And so, verse 26, his master answered, you wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I haven't sown and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you should have at least invested the bank money with the bank, and you would have got 0.001% interest if you were with Barclays. But at least if you'd done that, you would have got something. But he didn't even act on what he said he knew. What he said he knew was wrong, and he didn't even act on it. So he wasn't a believer. So don't go into a spiral of introspection if you're a genuine believer. Here is a pretender who knows nothing of the master, and he gets what he deserves, condemnation. So what does it look like to be ready? Be faithful and wise. Be wise and persevering. Maximize the master's assets. Here is the agenda, the spread of the gospel. Go for it, wherever you are, whatever your circumstances. And for some of us, that may mean the practice of a new art, the art of studied neglect of things that don't really matter very much, so that we can invest in what really matters, given the future we know is coming. Let's pray together. This verse, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter the joy of your master. We thank you, our Father in heaven, for your grace, your generosity,